Good morning and welcome back to our Ask the Agronomist video series. I'm Kyla Watson here with Phil Long from a screen away. Phil, how's it going?
It's going great. Another beautiful day. We got a little bit of rain, which is a good welcome thing this time of the year.
Yes, absolutely. We did have a few storms that went through Latham country within the last couple of weeks, so unfortunately some farmers are out there scouting to see if they have green snap in their fields, and others are doing pretty well.
Yep, yeah, exactly. That's why we want to kind of touch base on this. There's just a lot of things to look at right now this time of the year, and like you mentioned, there's been hail, a lot of wind, just a lot of different things to go out and take a look at, and just a very crucial time of the year to be out scouting your cornfield.
Which leads me right into my first question. Why is now such a crucial time?
Yeah, so the first thing I always do whenever I go to any field is you got to understand where the corn plant's at, and that answers that question. I mean, we're sitting here, if you look at this corn plant, it's hard to see the tassels, but you can see behind me the tassels in the field, so it's at tassel. But however, we see here on the primary ear, there's silk coming out. So that trumps the tassel. We are officially at R1 stage. So this is the beginning of reproduction. The rest of reproduction, we're gonna, dehusk the ear and look at the actual kernels to see what stage we're at. But these silks coming out of the ear are going to give us an indication that we are starting that R1 phase.
Okay, very good. And this is some exciting things going on with the corn plant now. It's at its maximum height.
Exactly. So, we just went through that period of rapid growth, and this is where everybody does videos of corn plants growing overnight, because it literally does. It can put on one leaf, like we talked a few weeks ago, in just a matter of a couple days. With the heat that we've been having, really pushes this corn plant up in height very quickly. So yes, it's extended all the way up. It's got the tassel out, so that's the top of the growing point. It's done growing in height for the most part. Now it's going to kind of settle down. It's going to focus on this ear, and it's trying to strengthen up these nodes. We talk a lot about green snap and so forth, and that's one of the things it's doing. It's putting lignin back into these nodes so that it can strengthen those up for the rest of the season.
Okay, very good. Well, let's talk now about pollen shed and what's going on this week.
Sure. Pollen shed is extremely important. I know I was just out in the field yesterday. You can tell when you come out half yellow, there's a lot of pollen flying, which is a good thing. However, when you step into a cornfield, especially this year, there's just been a lot of variability out there. Even before you get out of the truck, the first thing that I look at right now is what do you see as far as tassels? Are most of the tassels coming out? Do you see it uniform? And unfortunately, there's not a lot of perfectly uniform cornfields out there. It's just the year we were given. But looking at those tassels gives you an idea of where the corn plant's at, because that typically a cornfield will pollinate for roughly a week or 10 days or so on average, but really there's a peak pollination window that's probably more like 4 to 5 days. So you want that cornfield and those corn plants to hit it at the same time. That way there's enough pollen flying to pollinate all these silks on each ear, because the silks are going to continue to come out and want to grab that pollen. But if the pollen's finished and you've got plants that are in uneven heights, you may miss that window. Some of these plants may miss that window and miss getting pollinated. So first thing I look at is the uniformity of the field. Obviously height plays a role, but you'll see those tassels coming out. Are they uniform coming out or not? That's a big key indicator with how the pollen shed's going, how the field's going to pollinate.
Okay, very good. And what about the length and girth of ear at this point?
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the things you want to look at, seems like this time of the year we're always thinking, okay, what's the yield going to be? That's always the question in mind. Well, so we talked earlier in the season about how this plant, V5 to V7, has really determined the number of rows around the ear, so that girth is established that way. And then up until this point, vegetative tassel, or R1, it's really established the length, so the number of kernels long. But we're still at a very critical stage, so it can, based on this pollination window, it can potentially abort or have pollination issues and not get all those pollinated. So we've got a potential kernel number there, but we really don't know and even have a guess as far as yield until these start to pollinate and we can get into that, closer to that R2 or that blister stage, where we know what's potentially pollinated, and then there's still ability for that to potentially abort kernels. So a critical phase when it comes to producing those kernels. This R1 stage really is extremely important. I would call it kind of a vulnerable time in the corn plant's life cycle. Not only because some susceptibility to that wind still, but also just this is the one time in its life cycle that it doesn't want to be stressed. So it's if you're looking at the plant, that's why we always talk about fungicides this time of the year. And when you're out there, the other thing that you should your eyes should naturally go towards after you see that primary ear and that ear leaf is look at those leaves and then look below that. That's really what your gauge is for fungicide applications, and understand, okay, how much disease is on this plant. Is it getting to the ear leaf? Because if you work in wheat or cereals like that, you're always trying to protect that flag leaf. Well, the flag leaf is typically at the top, like we see in the cornfields the last week or so coming out. But in terms of corn, that critical leaf is really the ear leaf. So we want to protect the ear leaf, and below, really those are the ones that are critical. So if you start seeing diseases show up on that ear leaf at this point, that's probably not a good sign, depending on the weather conditions that you're having here forward. And we just had a lot of humid conditions, a lot of heat, which is good, but that humidity can keep those diseases around for potential issues going into critical grain fill time period.
Okay, very good. And speaking of that, let's talk real quick about the stresses that the corn plant might be enduring this time.
Sure. So you mentioned earlier the hail issue. We have seen a lot of that. I know in some parts in southern Minnesota, and a lot of areas have, even this last weekend, gotten hail. So defoliation is a good way to think about this, how critical this time period is. At R1, if we were to strip all these leaves off and defoliate it down to just the stick or the stalk of the plant, we would lose essentially almost 100% of our yield, because everything is stored up in these leaves. Now, if we move to the next stage around R2 or blister, it's only going to be about 70% yield loss. So it has an amazing ability to adapt, but that's why I'm stressing the importance of this time period for making sure that you're watching those diseases and things like that, because we want to make sure that we protect the plant during that. There are other ways that I've seen a lot of water stress too, a lot of issues out in the field, depending where you're at in the countryside in Latham country. There's a lot of areas that could use more rain, and one of the things that we look for there is this, going back to the silks. So if you have stress, typically stress in most plants induces the plant to want to finish reproduction or move things ahead faster. But typically what happens with a corn plant is these silks, because there's so much water in those, they are delayed in emerging. So if they come out slow and the pollen's already flying and shedding like it is now, they may miss that window. So there may be a lot more kernel issues and pollination failure or pollination issues happen if you don't get those silks out in time. So it's one way to think about it. The delayed silk emergence is one of those things that can really affect this time of year. That's why it's so critical. Farmers sometimes may stay up at night thinking about, okay, I don't want to see moisture stress right now. We don't want to see any stress right now, really, and that's why it's such a critical time of the year. So just some things to keep in mind when you're out scouting fields right now. There's a lot to look at. It seems like corn plants all look the same, but there's a lot going on in their life cycle, and after this period of rapid growth, they're really focusing on the ear now. It's time to focus on grain production and putting that all into the ear.
Okay, very good. Well, thanks, Phil. Is there anything else that you would like to add this morning?
Nope, I think we got a good cover. We're always here for questions, and as always, get out, scout those fields, get out of the truck is the important part, and just go looking at some corn and see what you can find, and feel free to give us a call.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I will catch you back next week virtually, and until then, have a good week, and thanks to our listeners for tuning in. Have a good day.